Hey Wargamers, today is the second day of official previews for the upcoming Tau Empire Codex. It talked about the Bork'an Sept, it talked about Riptides, and it also talked to some extent about storm surges. So that's what we're going to discuss today. If you like this video, go ahead, hit subscribe. That way you don't miss any of my upcoming videos discussing the Tau Empire Codex release and then doing interviews afterwards. So, alright, let's jump into it. We'll talk first about some of the more general things that we learned from this preview, and then we'll get into the Bork'an specific stuff. Alright, so in general, we learned some pretty important things about Riptides. They are improved pretty significantly. Of course, a lot of this is going to depend on how the points actually play out and their relative point cost to other options in the same slot. But overall, GW has made it sound like Riptides are going to be a much bigger component of Tau Empire armies moving forward. They said you're going to see a lot of them, and they used all caps, so they got to be serious, right? Basically, yeah, there's some pretty nice improvements to Riptides. Let's start with the weapons. So of course you have the heavy burst cannon and the ion accelerator. The improvements that they made to heavy burst cannon is basically making it heavy 12 instead of heavy 8, and then making it 2 damage instead of 1. For the ion accelerator, they basically took the overcharge profile, made that the standard profile, and then the new overcharge profile is heavy D6, same as the standard, strength 9, minus 3 AP, and then a static 3 damage. So you get +1 strength and a consistent 3 damage for overcharging. And of course, if you overcharge and you roll a 1, you take a mortal wound. So right off the bat, both of these improvements seem pretty important. For the heavy burst cannon, moving to a static or a standard 12 shots to begin with is really nice. That's a fair amount of firepower, and overall it's going to be a reliable source of damage. You're going to be able to take out heavy infantry and even some light vehicles using the heavy burst cannon reliably. In contrast, the ion accelerator is a random number of shots, meaning that it's not reliable. It still has a place. It still looks like it could be positioned very well to take out heavy vehicles, things like that, monsters, whatever. It seems like it could do a fairly good job at that, but really, in my opinion, it seems like it's going to depend, A, on points, how much that actually costs, and then 2, the ability of ion cannons. We've heard that ion cannons are supposed to be a lot better on hammerheads, so maybe that's going to be a better place for that type of technology, is on a hammerhead chassis instead of on a Riptide. And then third, the ability to bring Evaras depending on the tournament format. So if it's really cheap, or ion cannons on hammerheads are not very good, or I can't bring Evaras, the ion accelerator option on the Riptide seems like it could be very good. But if I can, bring really good ion cannons on a hammerhead, or bring Evaras, I'm probably going to do that instead. So overall, just looking at these two weapon outfits, it seems like the heavy burst cannon is going to be a little bit more favorable just because of the volume of shots. And that gets even more insane when we look at the Nova Charge ability. So Nova Charging is going to work in the same way it did before. You take a mortal wound and you can pick an ability. You can do the 2d6 thrust move, you can take a 3+ invulnerable save, or you can bump the number of shots on your weapons to 18 heavy burst cannon shots, or a static 6 for your ion accelerator. So both of those options are good. You're getting another 50% output on your heavy burst cannon, and you're getting, who knows how much of an output increase on the ion accelerator because it's random. But you are getting 6. You're getting a static 6, which is, like I said, a huge issue. So being able to have a reliable source of damage out of that ion accelerator is important. It basically puts it on equal footing with a rupture cannon in terms of its ability to do damage. And the Riptide is a much more mobile and flexible platform than a static Tranifex. So having this option here is pretty good. What makes it even better is the new Riptide stratagem called Branch Nova Charge. It allows you to take 2 of the 3 Nova Charging options as a benefit instead of just 1. So a lot of the times that's probably going to be the 3-up invuln and taking the weapon boost, but maybe it's the end of the game, you don't really need to use your weapon, so you're going to take the 2d6 and the invulnerable save, or you're going to take the 2d6 thrust move and the weapon boost if you are in a situation where you need to kill something and then hide. If you can hide your Riptide, right? That's a big thing, is that it's harder to hide your Riptide now. So the 2d6 thrust move has to be used in a different way. It has to be used, either to get objectives or to stay out of range of something, but it's generally not going to be very easy to use it to duck behind cover or anything like that. So having that 2d6 stress move is going to be a little bit more of a situational choice, but in general, you're probably going to be wanting to spend 1 command point every turn to get that 3-up invulnerable save and boost your weapon output. So that's going to be a drain on your command points, but it's probably going to be worth it to keep one of your Riptides at peak operating capability. Keep in mind, in match play, you can only use each stratagem once per phase. So in this case, you're only going to be able to use this on 1 Riptide at a time. So if you're bringing multiples, which I don't think is out of the question, again, depending on the point cost, I could see people bringing 2 or 3 Riptides, maybe 2 heavy burst cannon, 1 ion accelerator or something like that, depending on their army composition. And you're only going to be able to choose 1 to do this on. So choose wisely. All right, so let's move on to the Bork'an specific stuff. Again, this preview confirms what we saw earlier in that leak, that the Bork'an Sept tenet is that you increase the range of rapid fire and heavy weapons by 6 inches, which is huge. It makes a huge difference for a lot of weapons. For rapid fire weapons, we're talking about better plasma rifles, we're talking about better pulse rifles. Being able to double tap or triple tap in the case of fire warriors with a Fireblade, Cadre Fireblade next to them, that is huge. That makes a big difference, and it makes deep striking Crisis a lot more viable. It also is really important for those heavy weapons, like the equipment on the Ivara, or broadside, or hammerhead weaponry. All of these things are going to benefit immensely from that extra 6 inches of range, but especially the Ivara. So what we're seeing with this Sept trait is basically an improvement in the capabilities of a lot of the Tau weaponry, a lot of things that you see almost in every army, and then also being able to better select your positioning on the board. If you have an extra 6-inch range, that means that you don't have to put yourself out in the open if you don't need to in a lot more situations. So yes, adding 6 inches to a 30-inch weapon, you get 36 inches. That's still going to put some parts of the board out of reach, so you may have to position accordingly. But overall, being able to put yourself in the position that you want to is a little bit easier with that extra 6 inches of range. So that's very helpful. Later on in the preview, they talk about the Storm Surge and how the Storm Surge is particularly going to benefit from the Bork'an Sept tenet, but we don't have a lot more information on that. They say, yeah, it's going to help with the bands of range and everything like that, but they don't give us any specifics, which is too bad. So we'll have to wait for the Codex to see what that actually looks like. I'd also hope that, in the case of the range bands, that they are explicit about how those two interact, because if you're adding 6 inches to the maximum range, is that 6 inches to the maximum range of each range band, or is it 6 inches just to the greatest range band? It's unclear, and so hopefully that's explicit, if not in the Codex, in the first FAQ that will come out 2 weeks after release. So there's that, but they highlight the Storm Surge is benefiting from this new experimental weapons stratagem for Bork'an. It's 1 command point and allows you to re-roll a single die used in determining the number of shots from a randomly determined weapon profile. So for the ion accelerator, it's heavy D6. So you'd be able to re-roll the D6, or if it's a 2d6 shots, you're going to re-roll one of those 2d6. And yes, that's going to help the Storm Surge, certainly, but again, I really think this is going to help the Ivara out. The Storm Surge, yeah, it benefits from the Bork'an tenet, but the Ivara is really, the Ivara is, going Super Saiyan with this Sept tenet. It's just incredible. And having this ability to re-roll one of the dice used in determining the number of shots is huge for Ivara, because not only do you have this, but then you have your standard 1 command point re-roll. So you could re-roll 2 of your randomly generated number of shots in a single phase without breaking the rules. So you're going to have a really good chance of getting that high number of shots out with a Ivara, with a Bork'an Ivara, without having to take much risk. You're going to be able to put that out really when you need those targets to die. So, yesterday we talked about the the focus fire stratagem for Tau Sept. This is in some ways a counterpart to that for Bork'an. We don't have the ability to do focus fire, but we do have the ability to re-roll a single random die roll for one of our high-powered weapons. That's going to be a clutch move in certain situations. So I'm really excited about this. I think it's a great utility piece for Tau, and it's going to make our units a lot more reliable. It's going to make the Riptide more reliable. It's going to make Storm Surges more reliable. Anything with a random number of shots more reliable. So yes, this does help Bork'an Riptides as well, but Evars are really going to shine through. If you don't use Evars, if you don't use Forge World or Forge World isn't allowed, then yes, look at this as being a huge boost to Riptides as well. So overall, I think this, again, is really going to be the standout Sept. We'd have to see some pretty major improvements from the other Septs in terms of their traits or their stratagems associated with those traits, which is certainly a possibility. I'm going to be all ears until the Codex drops, but right now this looks like it's a really strong contender for top Sept. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and of course, happy wargaming. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. I want to thank all my patrons over on Patreon. Your support really makes a difference for me, and I really appreciate it. Special thanks goes out to NoExcusesPanda, Paul Leuders, TauOswell, Andy Young, Peter Benjamin Parker, Deverson, and Giovanni DiMaggio. You guys rock, thank you. If you liked this video particularly well, head on over to Patreon and consider joining our community over there. Thanks as always, and happy wargaming.